Halsey's fifth studio album, The Great Impersonator, is here. This review arrived a little late because this album's a really dense and heavy listen. I argue that it's actually Halsey's best record to date, a feat considering I really liked her 2021 record, If I Can't Have Love, I Want Power. Halsey again shifts genres for this record to what I can really only describe as a mix between Manic and her earlier works, Room 93, which ironically did release 10 years ago. So much has happened since her last record, including a highly publicized record label split with Capitol Records over her ability to release music whenever she wanted. She's currently with Columbia Records, was diagnosed with lupus and T-cell disorders, gave birth to a son, and entered a headspace where she really thought she was gonna die. The Great Impersonator is such a dark and thoughtful record. She truly thought that this was going to be her last record. It's a very tough 18 tracks to listen to. It sprawls through different genres and time periods, each track paying tribute to an artist as per her 18-day countdown, where she got to impersonate different icons. Despite the homages, her voice and authenticity carries through each track. There's something for everyone, no concern for cohesion, and I think it works. It's actually her most acclaimed record to date, but how do I feel about it? I'm going to share some overall thoughts before doing a quick track by track. I recall that people were sleeping on this album and its singles in my VMAs video, which I still think is true, but this album's just really a downer. It's about the fear of being forgotten and unloved after you pass away. It's existentialist, it's brutal, it's very honest, and that is going to turn away casual listeners. Still, it's her best record. It captures a wide spectrum of emotions, even fleeting joy here and there. Her artistry has always been called into question, but on here it's very undeniable that she had a vision and concept that she executed. This album really does like to dissect the idea of celebrity, something that's been heavily interrogated this year musically and real life. I really couldn't help but think about Chappell Roan's recent outburst about fame, consuming her life, and even Liam Payne's recent passing. This album touches on Halsey's own ghosts and insecurities, the decision to homage other artists and take on their styles and sounds to share her story of survival makes this very compelling, even if the album does occasionally drag because of its length and amount of ballads. Songs like Ego and Panic Attack are what I really came for, the latter being a wise choice for a single because it's pretty much just Dreams by Fleetwood Mac, but with some cutting lyrics about real life events about being sick. Even Lucky, a direct homage to Britney's classic, really proves that Halsey still has the ear for making a poppy earworm. But I did end up loving tracks like Hometown and Arsonist, mid-tempo tracks that sees her explore different genres and sounds that she's dipped her toe in before. One particular track that I really loved was Life of the Spider Draft, which hit me. I had to actually pause this track because of how sad it was. It's a very simple piano track that blends this killer metaphor of a spider seen in a kitchen being killed out of fear. With her experience in the spotlight, fans of her first proper record, Badlands, will also love that Hurt Feelings really does capture her older style so well while confronting her daddy issues. My personal favorite track, though, has to be the title track, which serves as the finale of sorts. It was produced by Emil Haney, who some of you from my Lana videos will recognize as a producer that I love. This trippy track really does feel odd in its delivery and contrasting tones. She really does try to evoke Bjork on this one, which I vaguely see. The chorus asking the question if the story dies with the narrator is a very powerful one because it dares us to question what is truth in this record, especially when, lives come to a close and there's no author left behind. It's a really chilling record. And now for the track by track. The Only Living Girl in LA is a great opener. It's acoustic, it evolves throughout. The lines about leaving her body and how it was never hers speaks to dissociation and disconnection of self, something that the Halsey persona was a response to Ashley, the person herself. I have to really call out that line when she says that her special talent isn't writing or singing, it's feeling everything that everyone alive feels every day. That anchors back to the whole artist are humans themes. And the outro is pretty gorgeous. Ego's a really fun track. It's a perfectly 90s punk track. The song's messaging is pretty vague because we don't know who the ego is. Is it her personality or the mystique of fame itself? Either way, it's a really catchy song, and the bridge speaks to wanting to go back to the beginning before winning big and just being a person. Dog Years is a darker track. It's really fascinating. I revisit it a bunch because it goes from talking about her blood type to the metaphor of sending a dog to the farm, the metaphor that you tell a kid, when the dog's about to die. The chorus being a double entendre for sensuality, but also from the perspective of a dog on its way to death and mercy should not work, but it does. Letter to God 1974 is told from the perspective of a young kid who's just so miserable. He's jealous of a classmate with leukemia because at least he's loved and cared for. It's really sad, it's nostalgic and miserable. Panic Attack is one of my personal faves. It's just a perfect homage to the 70s, but the lyrics are a knife. That line in the bridge, "but my body's keeping score," hits home because it really does talk about how bodies register trauma. And that feeling's in the chorus when she asks if it's love or a panic attack because she's unsure if the passion she's feeling is just anxiety of wanting something to work out. The End is probably the most effective acoustic ballad on the record. It's one of the best written songs here. It's definitely about how she really does want to continue fighting for her life at that very final chorus line. I Believe in Magic is an ode to motherhood that strikes parallels between her and her mother, realizing how hard it is to actually be a mother and how she should have been kinder to her mom when she was just a child. A Letter to God, 1983, is a callback to the previous chapter, but now the narrator's immediately regretting their prayer to be ill because they love their life and they don't want it to end. Hometown is a highlight of mine just because it's a proper country track inspired by Dolly Parton. It reminisces about a classmate who died when she was a teenager and how she still thinks of him and how haunting it is that he'll always be remembered for what he looked like when he died at 17, evergreen, even 11 years later. I Never Loved You is this heartbreaking story of someone who's on an operating table calling out for a lover who she knows is never going to come to her deathbed, so she kind of plays it off that she never loved them or loved them in vain. I feel like this one is a really cathartic and dangerous track. I really did like it. Darwinism's melody reminded me of 21 Pilots' Heathens to the point on my first listen I kept on wondering what song reminded me of it. Nonetheless, it's a very pretty ballad, though I do feel like it could have been cut or rearranged just because of all the back-to-back ballads. Lonely as the Muse ups the tempo again, returning to rock for a moment. It's a tribute to Amy Lee, her dark rock queen. This one started as a poem, and you can kind of tell it started off as a poem because each verse is really well fleshed out. I was really reminded about her underrated song Nightmare. Arsonist opens with a reverse line. This one's kind of a condemnation of her ex-partner. It made me realize her ex really did suck because it likened him to an arsonist who burns everything down. The lines, "Did you know the father's DNA stays in the mother for 7 years?" That really just gagged me because she's just counting down the days that she's being freed from this man molecularly. I already talked about Life of a Spider draft. I cannot praise this track enough. I think even as a voice memo sounding draft, it's just a very important track that summarizes the record's fears so well. I couldn't help but think of that really short track on Hopeless Phantom Kingdom, Sorry. I would have loved to see this track be finished, like just to see kind of more instrumentation on it. Hurt Feelings feels like a direct contrast to I Believe in Magic because she's confronting her absentee father, her saying water's forever, and invoking that metaphor about herself and being cleansed in a bath. She reiterates that she can never really be like her father, that she pledges to be someone that her son can be proud of, someone who stayed. Lucky recontextualizes Britney's classic song to fit her specific situation in life, from her illness to becoming a single mother during her premiere of a movie to lying to everyone about how she was doing. I recall there was some controversy because Britney herself seemed to lash out at it, but then it was just really a misunderstanding. I think it is really a good love letter though to Britney herself, who has suffered quite a bit, and there are some interesting parallels between her and Halsey's life. Letter to God, 1993, circles back to Halsey being in a much better place, asking God for peace because she's finally found someone she doesn't want to get rid of. Her son. She has someone and something to live for, and I feel like it's a good wrap-up to that storyline. And again, the title track is a closer that more or less sees the narrator of the record and Halsey herself sort of come to terms with finality in life while positing questions, asking us what is really truth in the story and how do we know since we're watching so far away. The part of the song really does add some whimsy to the whole track. It really does feel like a magician's final act in a show. Overall, this is a very purposefully exhausting record that's not really meant for commercial success so much as catharsis. I think Halsey's done a great job with this, so even if it does get buried this year because it is probably the darkest and saddest mainstream pop record of the year, I am more than happy to give this an 8.3 out of 10. It's just not for everyone, or at least anyone in a happy headspace right now, but I do see that people will give flowers to this record as the years come down. And that's a wrap. Thank you so much for tuning into this rather short kind of review. I just felt like this record was too heavy to talk about, and it's also Halloween weekend, so I just wanted to keep this short and brief. I initially planned to cover Lady Gaga's Disease song, and I do have a video in the works for that, but I'm just waiting for the visuals to happen so I don't have to do 2 videos on it. I really did like that track a lot, and there's so much rich parallels to her earlier discography that I want to discuss, so stay tuned for that. A quick shout out to my members. Thank you so much for staying with me and this channel. A shout out to my members. Thank you so much for taking that extra step and joining the channel. Let me know what you think in the comments below about Halsey's new record, whether or not it was for you, whether or not you even knew it was coming out this week. And wow, we are really reaching the end of music this year as holiday music starts to tune up like at the beginning of November. What a year this has been. Once again, thank you for your time, and I hope to see you next video.